Salve Omnibus. Now, you may think it odd that I make a video criticizing a dead person, but I see no problem with this for 3 reasons. Number 1, I make the videos I want to make, and people watch them who want to watch them. That's how this relationship works. Deal with it. Number 2, does it really matter if the person's dead or not? People will bring up men like Christopher Hitchens, who died recently, as well as figures from history, so it's only fair that I can criticize them as well. And number 3, men die, ideas don't. Now, I'm debating whether or not to make a video doing an overall criticism of Christopher Hitchens, the god of atheism, because New Atheism as a movement is dying, largely due to the fact that a negative movement can't sustain itself in the long run, and as evident by Atheism Plus and the split between liberal and progressive atheists, as well as other splits as exists with people like AIU, this movement is ripping itself apart as we speak. You add nothing to the conversations, your arguments are overused and boring, and as I want to point out in these sorts of videos, the heroes you looked up to were not heroes, but in fact very flawed, who really only succeeded in their command over language and their eloquent style. Deep down, their arguments were and are absurd. Case in point, the late comedian George Carlin, a man I think a lot of liberals and new atheists really look up to as the sort of atheist, free speech, anti-PC firebrand. And it fits the general narrative that in the 1990s and 2000s, when the religious right was on the verge of creating a theocracy, you had this small band of brilliant new atheists stand up to these fascists with reason and logic and manage to defeat them in the end. And as we'll see in this video, or just by looking at history, this was never ever the case, and the idea of the religious right wanting to create a fascist theocracy in America is just as fictitious as the idea of the patriarchy.
I was a victim of my own success, and I did some Ed Sullivans I hate. On those Ed Sullivan shows, I began to realize, not just there, everywhere, all these shows, I didn't fit.
What? A comedian? Having to work shows where he didn't exactly fit in with the environment? How illuminating! I'm sure this is a completely unique situation that no one's ever had to deal with.
And here's what I was missing. I was missing who I was.
Yeah, I'm sure Alexander the Great dealt with the same thing. I mean, he's far from home, in Persia, surrounded by a foreign culture with foreign customs, alien to Macedon and the Greeks. And he went to his generals and said, "Man, I'm missing who I am. We should just go back home." No, he went on to conquer India. Do you know why? Because he didn't get bogged down in childish questions like, "I'm missing who I am." A man makes himself continuously through his experience. I had to wash dishes and mop floors. Do you think that's the environment that best suits me? You sound like an SJW who needs the world to fit their sensitivities.
I began with a dream of being Danny Kaye, which is a very mainstream dream. It's very middle America. It's a people pleaser job. And I dreamed a path that was traditional. Comedian, disc jockey, comedian, actor, big success.
And that didn't happen? You're speaking on a televised interview decades later because people are interested in your experience. Hell, this interview was put on YouTube after you died. You've become immortalized in a sense.
A mainstream dream. Meanwhile, what I really was an outlaw and a rebel.
What, when you were fighting U.S. Marshals in the Old West?
Because I had lived that kind of life. I got kicked out of 3 different schools. I got kicked out of the Air Force. I got kicked out of the choir. I got kicked out of the altar boys. I got kicked out of summer camp. I got kicked out of the Boy Scouts.
I think this is telling. He's using examples of him failing as a way to make himself look good. He's trying to use this to make him seem like this rebel who was so against the grain that he was kicked out of all these organizations. But to me, and I think to most people who value success in life, this is a sign of a deadbeat dropout, who has no concern or interest for other people. And guess what? The fact that you managed to succeed in life despite all these failings shows the level of prosperity that society has, that you can be a complete loser and still make it. So go on, tell me how you're against the sort of system that put you on stage where others would conscript you into the army or put you in jail.
And I quit school at 9th grade.
You're like a regular Michael Collins, aren't you?
I had great marks, I was a smart kid, but I didn't care.
And here we come to my favorite aspect of edgy postmodern thought, the praise of apathy.
They weren't teaching what I want. I didn't give a shit. It's important in life if you don't give a shit. It can help you a lot.
I love how this is something that's looked up to nowadays. The people, the ideas we value are the ones who go, fuck caring about anything or anyone, everything needs to be about me and my feelings.
So I didn't give a shit.
The caveat to that statement, whenever somebody makes it, is about anybody but me.
And I was a pot smoker when I was 13. We broke the law, we broke into cars, we broke into offices, we broke into Columbia University, we broke into stores. We did all sorts of unlawful things.
So you broke the law, violated people's property rights, and cost taxpayer money to be an asshole. And now you expect to be praised for it. Look, I get it with examples like, when Frederick the Great invaded Saxony, but the stuff you're saying is what people use when they want to say, hey, look how stupid I was when I was a teenager.
And I was that kind of person. I was one who swam against the tide of what is expected.
Yet despite all that, you've become a wildly successful comedian, so if anything, you did things that you thought went against the current, but still let it carry you because it gave you success. And people like you are the establishment now. Nobody is impressed that you make a joke about religion.
And what the establishment wants from us. But I didn't know that about myself, because this dream blinded me. This dream was about America, about the path that we all follow, the middle of the road, middle class America, mainstream will dream.
What, the middle-class 1950s life, the most prosperous and stable period in history, when you could have the highest standard of living on Earth, so much so that only one parent had to work a job that didn't even require a college degree and could afford a big house with multiple cars and a television. This is the ideal life that people in all of history have only dreamed about. And now the greatest generation, which had to endure decades of poverty and war, have finally managed to achieve this and give their kids a life of peace and comfort. And you say, fuck that. That's one of the most selfish things I've ever heard.
And meanwhile, I'm sitting there like this, fuck those people. Fuck that shit. Look at this stupid shit. No, I don't want
Yeah, fuck those people. What have they ever done for you?
to be in the bunny number. Can I get out of the bunny number, please? I don't want to put on that fucking uniform. And
no one ever forced this on you. If you didn't want to live a mainstream life, being that we are a democracy, you can do whatever you want. But because we are not a solitary animal, you have to deal with the fact that people have social values and not everyone has to cater to you.
And I didn't know this dissonance was inside me.
You didn't know you were a rebellious teenager?
And in the period this is happening, all through the 60s, the counterculture was forming. The free speech movement started in Berkeley. The hippies were growing into a force.
Which were a tiny minority of the actual population, and from which the anti-free speech, progressive fascists that control modern institutions like the media and education were born. The very people that modern anti-SJWs claim people like you opposed. Liberals, this is your fault.
And peace, love, power, flower power, pot smoking, anti-authority. See, bing, ding, ding, ding.
And now they are the establishment. They are the authority. Traditionalism is the most revolutionary ideology of our time. You want to be anti-establishment today, or any point during the 21st century, you be a conservative. It's people like Carlin who brought about the very monsters you claimed he opposed.
Anti-authority. Throw over the establishment. Burn down the math building? Wow! Ding, 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 ding. So I gravitated toward that because I was that person, really. And
I think, much like how SJWs want to extend their childhoods into their 20s so they try and force society to center around them, the same happened with the hippies. These teenagers and losers didn't want to adapt and integrate into a society which valued hard work and cooperation, so they would rather tear down that society just to keep from wearing a suit.
And the people I hung around with were that way. The musicians I knew in the late 50s had gone through that transition. Suddenly they looked different, and their music changed. And I'm listening to people like the Buffalo Springfield. I'm listening to Bob Dylan. I'm listening to these people, and
who became a Christian. A lot of these people became Christians. And you know the difference between them and you? They joined a movement that stood for something, not just being against things.
I realize these artists are using their talent to project their feelings and ideas, not just please people.
Holy shit, no fuck. Are you serious, mate? That's such a revelation. I can't believe no one's ever figured this out.
And I suddenly was able to see my place and to realize I was in the wrong place. You see, in 1967, the summer of love, the peak of the hippie movement, I was 30. I was entertaining people in nightclubs who were 40. And they were at war with their kids who were 20.
Who were at war in Vietnam.
There was a generation war. I was in the middle of it. I was 30, 20, 40. And I'm going, see, what the fuck am I doing over here? These are the people that will at least understand me and give me a chance. So it took 2 years. I didn't go to the mountain and come back different. I didn't do a Bobby Darin. I didn't do a whatever, those people who just go away and they're back new suddenly.
So you're not Odysseus.
I took 2 years to change, and it happened on television. So I had denied that part of myself, and finally it came into full flower, and I never became a really big success.
Oh, I mean, it's not like people still revere the words you say after you've died.
Until that. I probably had 200 television appearances by that time, and I still wasn't realized as a writer, comedian, as a comedian. By that I mean I hadn't let myself grow into that. And I found out later I was more than just a comedian.
So let's get down to why I made this video in the first place. Why am I criticizing a comedian who's been dead for years? It's because I've noticed that he's one of the people that, like Hitchens, are revered as being one of these proto-anti-SJW liberals who said all this profound stuff and helped take on the establishment. But from what he said in this interview, nothing he said is insightful in any way. He was a rebellious kid in the 50s who wanted to go against the grain, and by his comedy, managed to extend that rebelliousness throughout his adult life. But he hasn't said anything profound here. And so I guess to conclude, my point is that the heroes liberals will often bring up, who fought for free speech and whatnot, were spouting much of the same crap as the SJWs. And on a last note, liberals, if you actually want to change society, do it by proposing and actually trying to fix problems rather than point them out. You need to have a positive foundation. You'll get nowhere by being against things. Diabana.
And it always amuses me that so many people seem to think that bullshit only comes from certain sources. You know, advertising, politicians, salesmen. Not true. Bullshit is everywhere. Bullshit is rampant. Parents are full of shit. Teachers are full of shit. Clergymen are full of shit. Law enforcement people are full of shit. The entire country is completely full of shit.
And you have to point it all out.
In fact, this country was founded by a group of slave owners who told us that all men are created equal. That is what's known as being stunningly